So, connected to this whole topic of access and mental health, you could say that what is in excess is imagination. You're looking at someone and you're imagining that maybe they're angry, or that maybe they're thinking that you're stupid or whatever, and that's what paranoia would be. Or you look at something that's unknown and you're imagining something, and that's what fear is, right? You're imagining all the terrible things that could happen in that unknown situation. You're applying different meanings to it. And here then several things come into play, because imagination is the act of creativity, in a sense. To create something, at least in the artistic sense, would be to imagine, and then sort of express that thing that you've thought, that you've imagined. And so in a lot of therapy, an emphasis is put on self-expression. Right? The act of therapy itself is an act of talking to a therapist. So you're getting all these things out of your system. But furthermore, many therapies would also involve artistic expression, or trying to heal through art. And I think that maybe it's not simply that art has healing properties, but that the very nature of mental health may have something to do with an excess of imagination, with an excess of inner life, which you are not expressing. There is something that you're keeping to yourself, and it's sort of growing inside of you. So yeah, maybe the poles between these two things are somehow connected, that something so bad as depression may be in exactly the same spectrum as something as good as art, creativity of any sort. And that this is simply a matter of amount, of excess. And it's an excess caused by a certain blockage, right? If there wasn't a blockage, there wouldn't be an excess. It's like your inner life is building up inside of you because it can't come out. And so instead of saying things or painting things or kind of expressing yourself honestly, and this doesn't only have to be with words. I mean, it could also just be your general behavior, your body language. Maybe there are times when you're hiding your body language unconsciously through, decades of or even centuries at the transpersonal level, centuries of cultural kind of inhibitions of certain things. Maybe you won't act the way you feel, you won't say what you feel, and so on. And then two versions of yourself get created, right? One that is sort of your inner life, and one that's outside, that is how you actually react to the world. So it's interesting to me that there are a lot of scientific studies and research done into how stimulants are bad for mental health. And this is something I didn't fully understand the reasons for, how sugar is linked to depression and to psychosis, alcohol, all these things. And I think it's precisely because stimulants excite the inner life. They make you think, they make you sort of, they just make you think faster. So that if you're a person who is already living in a world that's very tinted by your inner life, then stimulants just sort of worsen that. It's funny how alcohol, in a sense, is also a stimulant, even though it's like a depressive drug, right? Or a drug that lowers your reflexes. Even then, you can recognize that if you've ever been really drunk, everything spins around really fast and your thoughts sort of flash around very fast and you don't have control over it. In a sense, it is slowing down your speech and it's slowing down your body, but it's heightening your inner life uncontrollably. And so as a final kind of thing to add to this topic, I wanted to address the topic of symbolic analysis, which I kind of focus on so much, because there is definitely something that connects all of these topics to symbolic analysis in my mind. In the very fact that by perceiving patterns, you are engaging with all of this imaginative / paranoid work, attitude, right? If something happens and on the same day that it happens, like this other event appears and it's all happening at the same time as you've been dreaming about something and so on. This sort of psychotic / shamanic perception of pattern is kind of a hyperactive state. You're seeing and imagining and creating links between things. And so your mind is working very fast, right? It's very similar to very negative states like depression, where you see something that reminds you of the past, and then that kind of connects to a bad memory, and then that bad memory connects to how you find yourself in a situation that is similar to that past experience and so on. And what the depression kind of does is it creates bridges between things and sees patterns that somehow upset you. But that's why it's interesting to me that at the same time there is this sort of other side to this, where you can see patterns in a way that dissolves depression and that precisely does the opposite, that makes life beautiful. Because there is something very strange about, again, call it what you will, right? Symbolic analysis or psychotic behavior or shamanism. There is something very poetic about it, because patterns are the nature of poetry, I think. And poetry understood in a very general way, not just written poetry, but like, I would say art in general. But I think poetry is a good example of it, because the classic thing to do in poetry would be to combine images in ways that you don't expect, or in ways that seem pleasing in some way or interesting. So you could say that, you know, that the sun is like a jewel, and the sun isn't a jewel, but it's like a jewel. You're connecting the symbol of the jewel to the symbol of the sun, and you're seeing that there is an interesting resonance between them in your eyes. In this same way, symbolic perception has a lot to do with your own personal aesthetics, or likes and dislikes, or what you find interesting. There are combinations of images that you find interesting, and these stand out for you as a pattern. But then it's interesting, at least for me it's interesting to have seen this connection between excess and stimulation with the rate at which these patterns form, right? The speed and quantity of these patterns. Because there is a certain amount and a certain speed which becomes unmanageable by the human ego. The ego gets absolutely inflated by the unconscious, and then that's when you could call it a real sort of health issue, a real sort of illness. But I think it's important to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the state on which a lot of these mental illnesses are based on is, in my opinion, an incredibly natural and good state, and a good way of perceiving things. And of course the criticism could be made that these kinds of tunnel visions, where you're just interested in seeing symbols everywhere and piercing to some sort of transcendent truth, that this kind of tunnel vision is inherent to the act of analysis, but I think it isn't. I think that what overstimulates the inner life into such a frenzy is an array of external and cultural conditions that have nothing to do with the act of symbology and synchronicity and all of this. Again, things like just stimulants, the way how the way how a lot of our culture is based on stimulating in order to make us feel something, instead of destimulating in order for what's inside it to be felt. Right? Stimulation is a way of hiding what you're feeling, but it disguises itself as a way of feeling, right? A way of reaching, and once you are accustomed to a certain degree of stimulation, then you become numb to it and you need more stimulation. But all you're doing is hiding something. There is something that you don't want to feel. I mean, comfort, all sorts of comfort foods and drinks and drugs used in this sort of comfort / escapist way are taken not just because you want the pleasure of the substance, but because the moment when the clock ticks and it says, oh, it's time to eat, it's time to drink, those are the moments where something inside is looming and you feel it and you want to stop it before it's too late. A certain feeling of uneasiness, a certain dissatisfaction, a certain questioning of dogmatic beliefs, and you need to kind of clamp it down with pleasure. But these ever-increasing layers of pleasure are stimulating, so therefore they worsen the speed of your inner life and take it into sort of hyperdrive, where indeed all your activities seem to be focused on some psychotic kind of point, a single kind of point, which doesn't see anything else other than what you're focused on. And so it's ironic in a way, because the content of analysis and the content of dreams, for example, is, in my experience, always related to the things that you're trying to hide. Dreams are always screaming out the things that you're trying to hide. So by hiding them and by stimulating yourself, you're making the dreams scarier. You're making the synchronicities scarier, to the point where the things that you're trying to hide are going to just come into your face. But the sad thing is that that's not really a solution, right? It would be nice if the solution was just to wait till things got so bad that they kind of woke you up. But I don't think that's how it works, because I think you can cross a threshold into just ill health and ill mental health, where the things that you've been repressing may come to haunt you, but they may come to haunt you and stay there, and you may be completely numb to any kind of beneficial effects that this traumatic experience could potentially have from a shamanic kind of view, right? It becomes too much for the mind to bear. So I think the solution is the opposite one. The solution is to de-stimulate yourself, right? Or in other words, meditation, not necessarily in its formal practice of sitting down and closing your eyes, but just the intention to slow down a bit. I think it's that's at least a part of it. There is a need to slow down, or at least I find that I have a need to slow down, and that slowing down in a lot of ways is really benefiting my inner life. And once you've slowed down, then all of these things, depression, psychosis, they slow down and enter into a domain that is really beautiful, that is not scary, that is not paranoid, that is the opposite of all these things, that is simply a realm of poetry, as I was saying before. It's a realm of seeing beauty in things, and seeing beauty in the connection of things, which is not the same as finding connections between things and trying to find the truth. And anyway, just some thoughts about that. Thanks.